court reporter is still here also.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
This meeting is being recorded and or transcribed.
All right, we're going to get started this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Barish. I'm the chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. And before we get started, I would just remind everyone that this is the third regularly scheduled meeting of the public session of the board that's being conducted telephonically because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're holding this meeting with all board members and all participating staff present in remote locations, in furtherance with the directives given by the Pennsylvania State Health Department and the governor. By way of background, back on March 6th, the governor made an emergency declaration regarding the situation. The governor's declaration eventually led to a statewide stay-at-home order that was issued for the entire Commonwealth. On April 22nd, the governor announced a three-phase reopening plan for the Commonwealth on a county-by-county basis. Unfortunately, Dauphin County, where the board normally sits, remains in the red phase and is therefore still subject to the stay-at-home order. Because of this ongoing situation, on March 11th, 2011, the Commonwealth's open, hold on a second, please. The Commonwealth's Office of Open Records issued an advisory order on how state and local agencies can conduct themselves in compliance with the Sunshine Act. Given these unprecedented, having a technical problem here. Given these unprecedented circumstances, the Office of Open Records is advisory subsequently updated on March 18th, April 22nd, and May 5th. The Office of Open Records advisory provides that under these emergency circumstances, the public business of the Commonwealth can be conducted telephonically, so long as a mechanism is put in place to allow for public access. We have done that here by providing public access to the audio of this meeting, the board's website, as well as by publishing the call-in information for the teleconference. Additionally, as is always the case, we have a court reporter dialed in who's transcribing this meeting. All that being said, I would ask everyone who has called in to please keep their telephones on mute unless and until you have something you're called upon to speak or wish to speak. Also, before anyone comes before the board to speak, please make sure it is clear for the court reporter and the record who you are. I'd also politely request that my fellow board members identify themselves when they speak or if they're making a motion so the transcript will be clear. Okay. For the record, I'd like, in addition to the 7 board members that are with us today, we also have our ex officios, Fred Strathmeyer, representing Russell Redding, the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Jennifer Langen, representing Joseph Torcella, the State Treasurer, and Kristen Heidingsfelder, representing Revenue Secretary Dan Hassel. Thank you all for joining us. A quorum of the board being present, I will call the proceedings to order. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, Tuesday, May 19th, to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters coming before the board. That meeting also was done telephonically. Next, minutes and transcripts. We have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of the March 11th and April 1st, 2020 meetings. May I have such a motion?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Reitzel moves that the board approve the minutes and transcripts of the March 11th and April 1st, 2020 meeting.
Commissioner Santoni seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion is adopted. Next, we have a report from our Executive Director, Kevin O'Toole. Kevin, are you there?
Yes, this is Kevin O'Toole, Executive Director.
Good morning, Chairman Barish. Good morning, Commissioners. For my Executive Director's report this morning, I would like to provide an update of the efforts currently engaged in by the Board to assist Pennsylvania's land-based casinos in preparing for their eventual reopening. Recently, Board staff forwarded to each casino operator a document entitled COVID-19 Casino Reopening Protocol. The COVID-19 Casino Reopening Protocol set forth minimum required standards that are intended to assure the safety of casino patrons, guests, and employees, and to assure an environment conducive to proper regulatory oversight. These minimum required standards were developed from a review of procedures submitted by the casinos as a group, along with individually submitted health and safety plans received from casino operators. Additional guidance was obtained from the Centers for Disease Control and guidelines published by the Pennsylvania Department of Health. The protocols adopted assure personal safety in a variety of ways, including the wearing of face masks, the enforcement of social distancing in all areas of the casino, limiting personal contact, and enforcing strict cleaning and disinfectant regimens in public and non-public areas of the casino facility. In conclusion, I would like to note that the protocols for reopening will be posted on the Board's website today. In addition, the timeline for reopening Pennsylvania's casinos will follow the Office of the Governor's plan for the reopening of businesses in the Commonwealth. Board staff is ready to continue its work with the casino management teams to reopen casinos in Pennsylvania when the green light is given. Thank you, Chairman. That's my report for today.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Kevin at this juncture? Hearing none. Thank you, Kevin. Next up, our Administrative Director, Claire Yantis. Claire, you may begin.
Yes, good morning, Chairman, board members. The Bureau of Administration is tasked with reviewing and modifying agency policies on an as-needed basis to ensure accuracy and clarity of process. Recently, the Office of Financial Management reviewed and updated the agency's billing statement of policy, a copy of which was provided to you in advance of this meeting. To summarize the changes, this policy was originally adopted by the board in 2012 and established a fixed fee schedule for routine petitions and investigations, as well as an itemized hourly billing for work performed by the board's gaming lab and for other non-routine matters. The policy also established the process and procedure for invoicing entities for this work. At this time, there are no substantive changes to the policy. All recommended revisions are administrative in nature, necessary to reflect expanded gaming entities and verticals. The fees and processes established in 2012 remain the same, and the procedure for how the agency is billing entities is not being modified. Unless you have any questions regarding these changes, I ask that you consider a motion approving the revised billing statement of policy.
There are any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Santoni moves that the board adopt the revised statement of billing policy as described by the Administrative Director.
Commissioner Smiler seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Next. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doug Sherman, Chief Counsel, you're up.
Yes, good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Rouhan Bora's request for removal from the board's involuntary exclusion list is the only petition before the board today for its consideration. That petition will be decided on the documentary record, which has, in advance of this meeting, been provided to the board for its consideration. By way of background, on May 7th, 2016, Mr. Bora, who was 18 years old at the time, entered Sugar House Casino by providing a false identification to security. While on the gaming floor, he actively gamed at several blackjack tables. Eventually, a pit manager requested his identification, and upon being questioned, Mr. Bora admitted to being underage. He was removed from the property and charged with a summary offense. On June 7th, 2017, this board placed Mr. Bora on the exclusion list until at least his 22nd birthday, at which time he would be able to request removal. Mr. Bora, who is now 22 years of age, is requesting removal from the exclusion list, and the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to that request. That matter is now ready for your consideration.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Smiler moves that the board grant Rouhan Bora's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Conditional, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you very much.
Yes, next we have withdrawals and surrenders and reports and recommendations presented by Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Good morning. The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw the applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals and entities: Rhodey Darch, Philip Headley Bocock, Paul Lewis Durkin, Adam Philip Goldstein, Drew Kelly, William Wright, J. Gleek Properties Limited, Julian Gleek, and Randolph John Anderson. In addition to these withdrawals and surrenders, Crown PA Gaming, Inc. also filed a petition seeking to withdraw the applications of 32 individuals or entities who will no longer require licensure since Crown PA Gaming's parent company, DraftKings, merged with SB Tech and became a publicly traded entity. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to any of these withdrawals or surrenders, the ones I specifically named, as well as the 32 individual and entities associated with Crown PA Gaming. As a result, if the board chooses to grant these requests, it would be doing so without prejudice to each of the requesters, and these matters are all now ripe for consideration.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Cronola, and I move that the board issues order to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Logan seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 6 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. These reports and recommendations, along with the complete evidentiary record for each hearing, have been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. The first report and recommendation before the board today pertains to J-Lock Chuan's petition for early reapplication for a gaming employee occupation permit. By way of background, Mr. Chuan held a gaming employee occupation permit and worked as a table games dealer at Presque Isle Downs. In November of 2018, Mr. Chuan filed to renew his permit, and he was issued a notice recommending denial of his application based upon his failure to provide proof that he filed federal tax returns in 2015, 16, and 17. In June of 2019, the board issued an order denying Mr. Chuan's renewal application on that basis. 6 months later, in December of 2019, Mr. Chuan filed his petition for early reapplication, attaching a record of account from the Internal Revenue Service for each of the tax years in question, thereby confirming that the taxes were in fact filed for those years. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an answer objecting to Mr. Chuan's request because 2 years had not yet passed since his application was denied as required by the board's regulations. A hearing in this matter was requested and held on February 20th, 2020. Mr. Chuan appeared and testified on his own behalf with the help of a Nepalese interpreter. Mr. Chuan testified that he did not provide the tax information earlier because he did not know how to obtain it. At the time of the hearing, OEC did not dispute that Mr. Chuan's taxes for the periods in question were in fact paid. Following the hearing, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that the board waive the regulation requiring a 2-year waiting period for reapplication and that Mr. Chuan be permitted to reapply early for his gaming employee occupation permit. In making this finding, the hearing officer concluded that the language barrier played a significant role in Mr. Chuan's non-compliance, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Logan moves that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of the Hearings and Appeals regarding the request for early reapplication made by J-Lock Chuan as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Mustio seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted. Thank you.
Next before the board is the report and recommendation pertaining to Don Tran. Mr. Tran was employed as a table games dealer at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia. On January 23, 2020, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Tran's gaming employee occupation permit after receiving notice that he paid a patron winnings on losing wagers, and when exchanging chips with the patron, he gave her more chips than were required. Over 3 days, these transactions resulted in $12,850 in losses to the casino. Mr. Tran was charged with several theft-related and gaming-related offenses. He was also terminated from Rivers, Philadelphia. As a result of these actions, the board's executive director issued an emergency order suspending Mr. Tran's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by Enforcement Counsel. A hearing in this matter was held this past February. OEC appeared presenting testimony and documentary evidence in support of its case. Mr. Tran appeared but did not testify. Consequently, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that the suspension of Mr. Tran's gaming employee occupation permit remain in effect, and this matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Chairman.
I'm sorry, technical problem again. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ricin moves that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Don Tran's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Santoni seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
Peter Donahue is the next matter before the board today. Mr. Donahue holds a gaming level 2 occupation permit and has worked as a VIP service host at Valley Forge Casino. In November of 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to revoke Mr. Donahue's G2 permit after it was discovered that he used his authority to issue complimentary benefits totaling $537 to pay for a meal for himself and his family at the Revolution Chop House restaurant in Valley Forge. He was terminated from his employment at Valley Forge as a result of his conduct. A hearing in this matter was held on February 4th, 2020. OEC appeared and presented testimony and documentary evidence in support of revoking Mr. Donahue's G2 permit. Mr. Donahue appeared and testified on his own behalf. During the hearing, he admitted to his actions, stated he was making the mistake of his life and that he understood that he deserved to be terminated. However, Mr. Donahue additionally testified that he was presently employed at for DraftKings in New Jersey, despite the circumstances which led to his termination in Pennsylvania. DraftKings was aware of his situation, and he was hoping to not have his license revoked and be given a second chance. After hearing the evidence presented, the report and recommendation issued by the hearing officer, rather than a revocation, recommended a 30-day suspension of Mr. Donahue's G2 permit, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Are there any questions or comments?
Well,
Hearing none.
the recommendation was
The recommendation.
the recommendation.
But that's not what we're voting on, right?
Well, we'll see what the motion.
The recommendation's 30 days, but the board's motion can be a revocation or anything less than that.
Commissioner Santoni, do you have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Santoni moves that the board adopt in part the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Peter Donahue's G2 employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Mr. Donahue's permit be suspended for 6 months.
Commissioner Smiler seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next report and recommendation before the board pertains to Andre Johnson. Mr. Johnson was issued a gaming level 2 employee occupation permit in March of 2016 and worked as a table games dealer at the Rivers Casino in Philadelphia. In November of 2019, OEC filed a complaint to suspend Mr. Johnson's G2 permit, alleging that he was charged with numerous felony offenses and misdemeanors, including rape and sexual assault charges. The hearing in this matter was held on February 27, 2020. Enforcement counsel appeared presenting testimony and documentary evidence. Despite receiving proper notice, Mr. Johnson did not appear at his hearing and it was held in his absence. At the time of the hearing, all of the charges were still pending against Mr. Johnson. Subsequent to the hearing, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that Mr. Johnson's G2 occupation permit be suspended due to his pending felony criminal charges, and that's the recommendation before the board.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Smiler. I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Andre Johnson's G2 employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Canola, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board is the report and recommendation regarding Cole Gadgerell. In January of 2018, Mr. Gadgerell was granted a gaming employee occupation permit allowing him to work as a table games dealer at Rivers Casino, Pittsburgh. In October of 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Gadgerell on the board's involuntary exclusion list and a complaint to revoke Mr. Gadgerell's gaming employee occupation permit. Pursuant to the findings of fact in the report and recommendation issued in this matter, it was discovered that on July 25, 2019, Mr. Gadgerell was a patron at the Meadows Casino, and at that time he took $200 worth of chips left behind by another patron at a table game. Mr. Gadgerell later returned to the same table where he was confronted by the state police and the patron who had misplaced the money, or chips. Mr. Gadgerell was with a friend who took the $200 out of Mr. Gadgerell's hand and returned it to the patron. Mr. Gadgerell was criminally charged and permanently banned from the Meadows Casino. The hearing on both the revocation and placement on the exclusion list cases was held on February 11, 2020. OEC appeared offering testimony, documentary, and surveillance evidence. Mr. Gadgerell appeared and provided limited testimony on his own behalf, essentially testifying that he was intoxicated, didn't realize what he did, and ultimately that all of the chips were given back to the patron. The hearing officer ultimately issued a report and recommendation stating that there is sufficient evidence to both revoke Mr. Gadgerell's permit and place him on the exclusion list, and that's the recommendation for the board today.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Canola, and I move that the board adopt in result the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals recommending replacement of Cole Gadgerell on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list, and that his gaming employee occupation permit be revoked as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Commissioner Logan, seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Paul Spadola. By way of background, on August 16, 2016, Mr. Spadola was accused of past posting wagers at Mohegan Sun Pocono. Consequently, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Spadola on the board's involuntary exclusion list, and in March of 2017, the board issued an order placing him on the list. On December 30th, 2019, Mr. Spadola filed a petition presently before the board, which requests removal from the involuntary exclusion list. OEC filed an answer objecting to this request, and a hearing in this matter was held on March 4th, 2020. At that time, Mr. Spadola testified that he did in fact cap bets, but that his actions were innocent mistakes that he made when he thought he was making a side wager. He further stated that he was going through personal family issues at the time, had been drinking, and also indicated that prior injuries, head injuries, caused him to make poor decisions. Following the hearing, a report and recommendation was issued recommending that Mr. Spadola remain on the board's involuntary exclusion list. In making this finding, the hearing officer determined that the board regulations require a person to show extraordinary facts and circumstances as to why they should come off the exclusion list if 5 years has not yet run, and that Mr. Spadola did not make such a showing. This matter is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Logan moves that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Paul Spadola's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and that Mr. Spadola remain on the exclusion list.
Commissioner Mustia, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Licensing?
Yes, this is Susan Hensel, the Director of Licensing. Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be license applications for 1 sports wagering operator, 1 video gaming terminal operator, and 2 conditional video gaming terminal establishments. In addition, there will be 125 principal and key employees, a qualifier, and gaming and non-gaming employees. Finally, there will be consideration of 1 gaming service provider applicant. First for your consideration is a sports wagering operator license for American Wagering, Inc., which does business under William Hill brands. American Wagering, Inc. is a Las Vegas-based business that offers online and retail sports wagering. American Wagering, Inc. was previously issued a conditional sports wagering operator license. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve the sports wagering operator license.
Cyrus Petrie, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel, we have no objection.
Thank you, Cyrus. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Mustia moves that the board grant the sports wagering operator license for American Wagering, Inc., as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Reitzel, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration is a VGT operator license for Django Entertainment, LLC. A VGT operator owns, services, or maintains VGTs for placement and operation at truck stop establishments. Django Entertainment, LLC was previously issued a conditional VGT operator license. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I provided you with a draft order and ask that you consider the order to license Django Entertainment, LLC.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Reitzel moves that the board grant the video gaming terminal operator license for Django Entertainment, LLC, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Santoni seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matters for your consideration are conditional VGT establishment licenses. The applicants are Dandy Mini Mart Inc. at 474 Reuter Boulevard in Towanda, and Dandy Mini Mart Inc. at 30023 Route 6 in Wysox. The board may conditionally license an establishment provided the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a completed application, and has not been convicted of a gambling law violation. A preliminary review of these applicants indicates that they meet these criteria. Note that these are strictly conditional approvals. Final approval will be based on the applicants meeting all of the eligibility criteria provided in the statute. A final eligibility determination will follow investigation and site inspections by the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. I have provided you with draft orders addressing each of the applicants and ask that the board consider a motion to approve the conditional VGT establishment licenses.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not object to the issuance of the conditional video gaming and terminal establishment licenses.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Santoni moves that the board grant conditional video gaming terminal establishment licenses to Dandy Mini Marts located in Towanda and Wysox, Pennsylvania, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Smiler seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next are approvals for one-year license extensions for the following VGT establishments. United Refining Company of Pennsylvania, number 36, located in Clarion County, and United Refining Company of Pennsylvania, number 71, located in Warren County. Both establishments were granted one-year conditional licenses approximately 1 year ago. Under the Gaming Act and board regulations, the board is authorized to extend the licenses for an additional 1 year for good cause. In each case, the background investigation and suitability report process for the company is continuing. I have provided you with draft orders and ask that you grant the one-year license extension.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel have an objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Smiler, and I move that the board grant the extension of conditional licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Knoll, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
In addition, there are principals and key employees and a gaming service provider qualifier. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 3 principals, 5 key employees, and 1 qualifier. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses and qualification.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not object.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Knoll, and I move that the board grant the principal and key employees, licensees, and GSP qualifications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Logan seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also temporary licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 5 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Logan moves that the board grant the temporary key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Mustio, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 107 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 3 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Mustio moves that the board approve the applications for gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Reitzel, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matters for your consideration are withdrawal requests. In each case, the permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided the board with 103 gaming and 45 non-gaming applicants for withdrawal. I ask that the board consider the order approving these withdrawals.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Reitzel moves that the board grant the withdrawal of gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Santoni seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, we have an order to certify the following gaming service provider, Richard Goddell, Inc. I ask that the board consider the order approving this gaming service provider for certification.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Santoni moves that the board approve Richard Goddell, Inc.'s application for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Commissioner Smiler seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
That concludes the Bureau of Licensing's matters.
Thank you very much, Susan. Next up, Chief Enforcement Counsel Cyrus Petrie. Good morning, Cyrus.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 13 matters today for the board's consideration, in which we will request the approval of 3 revocations, 2 suspensions, and 8 involuntary exclusions. The next five matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaint seeking the revocation of 1 non-gaming employee registration and 2 gaming employee occupation permits issued by the board, as well as the suspension of 1 non-gaming employee registration and 1 gaming employee occupation permit issued by the board. The complaints have been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in each complaint. The individual named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each respondent. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All file documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. We'll provide a brief summary of the facts and make a request for the appropriate board action in each matter. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee occupation permit issued to John Bick. Mr. Bick was involved in an accident wherein he killed a pedestrian with his vehicle and then fled the scene. As a result, Mr. Bick pled no contest to homicide by vehicle and aggravated assault by vehicle, both third-degree felonies, as well as involuntary manslaughter, a first-degree misdemeanor. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the gaming employee occupation permit issued to John Bick.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Smiler moves that the board approve the revocation of John Bick's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Canola seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to LaShonda S. Cooper, who was charged with felony strangulation and 3 related misdemeanors after being arrested for endangering a child. Ms. Cooper is accused of placing her hands around the child's neck and squeezing the child's neck until the child could not breathe. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the non-gaming employee registration issued to LaShonda S. Cooper.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Conditional, and I move that the board approve the suspension of LaShonda S. Cooper's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Logan seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Maria Klobach, who was caught stealing money from the main cage at Rivers, Philadelphia, while engaged in her employment duties as a cage cashier. As a result of her actions, Ms. Klobach was terminated. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requested the board revoke the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Maria Klobach.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Logan moves that the board approve the revocation of Maria Klobach gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Mustia seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Tracy Presley. Ms. Presley stole $3,660 from 19 different patrons at Mount Airy Casino while in the performance of her employment duties. As a result of her actions, Ms. Presley was terminated from her employment and criminally charged for her actions. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel will request that the board revoke the non-gaming employee registration issued to Tracy Presley.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Mustia moves that the board approve the revocation of Tracy Presley's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Reitzel seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Orlando Williams, who was arrested in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for carrying a concealed weapon without a license, which resulted in 2 felony charges, both of which remain pending. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Orlando Williams.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Reitzel moves that the board approve the suspension of Orlando Williams gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Santoni seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are deemed inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in each petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance that the board orders the proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of their inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website. The involuntary exclusions of Fareed Brown and Devon McCollum are the next 2 matters on the agenda for the board's consideration. Each matter results from the same fact pattern, so with the board's permission, I will read the fact pattern once and request the appropriate board action for each. Mr. Fareed Brown, while patronizing Harris, Philadelphia, reached into a chip rack and stole $6,000 worth of gaming chips, then successfully exited Harris, Philadelphia. Later that same day, Devon McCallum attempted to cash in the stolen gaming chips at Harris, Philadelphia. As a result of their actions, both Mr. McCallum and Mr. Brown were criminally charged for their actions, and both were permanently evicted from Harris, Philadelphia. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Fareed Brown on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's Commissioner Logan. I do have one for Cyrus. Cyrus, has Harris done anything to prevent this in the future? I mean, how does somebody just reach over and grab $6,000 chips? I mean, have they put any procedures in place to kind of prevent this from happening again?
Yeah. Chip thefts are an ongoing thing in all casinos nationwide, where individuals, when they see that a dealer might be distracted, well, they're called reach and grabs, where they'll get grabbing and run out of the casino with the chips. The procedures that are in place, and when such an incident happens, that the chips are then accounted for and credited throughout the whole casino. Therefore, when the individual attempts to redeem the chips, they can track those stolen chips, those chips as being stolen, so that they know that the individual who's trying to cash in the chip was involved in a crime. In this instance, Harris has put in procedures into place to try to eliminate individuals from reaching over and accessing the chip rack. Once the casino is reopened, we will go through all those procedures to ensure that those problems are rectified, so it would lessen the occurrence in the future.
Okay, thanks, Cyrus.
Anyone else have questions for Cyrus on this? If not, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Santoni moves that the board approve the addition of Fareed Brown to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Smiler seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And at this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requested the board place Devon McCallum on the involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments from the board on this matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Smiler, and I move that the board approve the addition of Devon McCallum to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Conditional, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Russell Giles on the board's involuntary exclusion list for illegally selling oxycodone on the Parks Casino gaming floor. As a result, Mr. Giles was criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Russell Giles on the involuntary exclusion list.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Conditional, and I move that the board approve the addition of Russell Giles to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Logan, seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Robin Groover on the board's involuntary exclusion list for leaving two children ages 10 and 12 unattended in a vehicle in the Mohegan Sun parking lot for approximately 1 hour and 50 minutes while she engaged in gaming activity within the licensed facility. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Robin Groover on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Logan moves that the board approve the addition of Robin Groover to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Mustio seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Brock M. Hall on the board's involuntary exclusion list for stealing gaming chips from Rivers Philadelphia's patrons on 2 separate occasions, from Parks Casino on 1 occasion, from a Parks Casino patron on 1 occasion, and from a Valley Forge Casino patron on 1 occasion. Mr. Hall committed these thefts by walking up to a table game, grabbing the gaming chips, and running out of the casino. As a result of his actions, Mr. Hall was criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requested the board place Brock M. Hall on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Mustia moves that the board approve the addition of Brock Hall to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Reisel, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Naeem Johnson on the board's involuntary exclusion list for passing 25 counterfeit $100 bills while patronizing Parks Casino. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Naeem Johnson on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Reisel moves that the board approve the addition of Naeem Johnson to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Santoni seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Christopher Lasecki on the board's involuntary exclusion list for illegally capping 5 wagers while playing a table game at Mohegan Sun Pocono, resulting in an illegal gain of $450. As a result of his actions, Mr. Lasecki was criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Christopher Lasecki on the involuntary exclusion list.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Santoni moves that the board approve the addition of Christopher Lasecki to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Smiler seconds.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The final matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Trevor Shook on the board's involuntary exclusion list for physically assaulting a security officer at Meadows Casino. As a result of his actions, Mr. Shook was criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police and permanently evicted by the Meadows Casino. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Trevor Shook on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Smiler moves that the board approve the addition of Shook to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Commissioner Knoll, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you. Best I can tell, that concludes the board's business today. The next scheduled public meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 10th at 10 o'clock. Given the continued uncertainties that we face, I would advise all interested parties to continue to monitor the board's website for the latest information on exactly how that meeting is going to be conducted. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
Commissioner Knoll, move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner Logan, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner.